Refugee Justice League came into existence in 2016 after President Trump was elected for the first time. And many of you will remember the Muslim ban that forbid people from various countries in the Middle East from coming into the country. And this sparked fear and unrest among that population particularly, and among refugees. And the Refugee Justice League grew exponentially in the next few months to over 500 or 600 members who were willing to step in and do as Norm indicated, represent refugees when they were harassed or contacted by law enforcement. I might just mention some of the kinds of problems that were experienced. One was an increase in hate mail, and the Refugee Justice League was able to contact law enforcement if they were threatening of life kind of statements. And even if they were not, just simply harassment, we could intervene, threaten civil lawsuits, and alert local authorities. Another problem that we experienced in 2016 were people being harassed on the street. Someone would have a hijab on, they looked different, and people would shout at them and say, "We don't want you here, go home." Sometimes paint was thrown on the sides of refugees' homes. One of the more difficult problems that they experienced were FBI agents coming to their homes on a Saturday afternoon, knocking on their door, asking to enter without a search warrant, and then go into the home and interview them about their relatives in their home countries, or interview them with the idea in mind to find information or evidence that might cause them to be deported from the country. The Refugee Justice League stepped in and explained to these individuals that they had rights, that a law enforcement officer cannot enter their home unless they have a search warrant signed by a judge that states with particularity why they're there and what they're looking for. And that helped and essentially stopped that practice. One other we had in a situation where refugees would go to the airport, they'd try to get on a plane, and they were on a no-fly list. And the federal government would give them no reason for why they were on the list, because it was protected by, quote, national security concerns, but they couldn't fly. And we had a number of those situations. One fellow was caught out of the country, an imam, and we had to go to federal court to get a judge involved to order that he be brought back into the United States. This particular refugee was a citizen at the time this happened to him. And so the no-fly list is, and the individuals were allowed to fly. So that was one of the problems that they faced, among others. One of the sweetest associations I had was with a little 11-year-old girl that sits here now, 7 years later. She was in school in Salt Lake City Junior High School, and she was discriminated against. And she wore a hijab, and people pulled it off, and they bullied her in school. And we intervened, and she was moved to another school, and she continued to be the A student that she was. And she's graduated. She graduated from high school at 16. She's now been accepted at Rice University. She's headed to law school, as I mentioned. And so I'll let her tell her story, and then we'll hear from Richard Lambert, and then we'll conclude with the past U.S. Attorney Brent Ward.
I was a really shy and reserved kid, and I started wearing the hijab in 4th grade. I had a lot of worry that I would be treated differently by classmates, especially because I didn't have any friends to start. My mom got involved, and she spoke to the principal as well as the teacher to just try to take some of that stress off of me. As that happened, I walked into class with the hijab on. Students started to crowd me, ask questions. I was very nervous, but I just carried it off as they're kids, they're curious. As time went on, they got a little more comfortable. They would make comments. They would call me toilet paper head. They would call me a terrorist or a bomber. And I tried to block out those hurtful comments. But I think as time progressed, it just continued to grow and grow, and they would continue to pick on me. And my mom got involved again. She spoke to the principal and the teacher and was like, hey, there's bullying going on. We should, if you can keep an eye out. The teacher would hear these comments and chose to not intervene. And one day as I was playing outside at recess, I had a student come behind me and pull off my hijab. I panicked and I put my hood for my jacket up, and I ran off to the bathroom, told my mom about it later, told the teacher about it. Teacher didn't seem to believe me or cared what I had to say. And that's when my mom got fed up and brought in a couple organizations to try to advocate for me. The principal continued to dismiss what those organizations had spoken to her about. Same goes to the teacher. After that point on, my mom got the Refugee Justice League stepped in, and they helped me put my voice out there. And we tried to push schools to enforce more strict policies on anti-harassment and religious clothing in particular. After that, I moved schools. I went to a really good school, the #1 school in Utah, and that really helped set me on the right path. I did really well academically. I consistently placed first in, and I really thrived at that school. I managed to graduate at 16, and then now I got accepted into Rice, and I'm going to be majoring in political science and minoring in English. But I think that having that step of the way and having someone that can advocate for me helped build my character, and realize that what I was going through and the situations that were happening to me, not just throughout school, but also throughout every day. I had a guy throw a shampoo bottle at me inside of a store. And just even everyday subtle things, like throwing a receipt at me or speaking to me in a rude tone compared to how they would speak to the person before me. I think having somebody who can advocate for me really helped me build that character and realize that that behavior was not acceptable. But yeah.
Thank you,
Congratulations, Maram, on your accomplishments, and we admire your courage.
Thank you.
As Jim mentioned, I spent almost 30 years of my career here in Utah as a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice, Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Utah. And that lasted for almost 8 years. At about the same time that I came into the position of criminal chief, there was a national upswing, a spike in crimes being committed by a small group of so-called criminal aliens. Now, let me help with a definition here. Criminal aliens were and are a small minority of the undocumented immigrant community who commit serious crimes and whose victims are predominantly law-abiding members of that community. In the U.S. Attorney's Office, we decided to crack down on these few who are causing so much difficulty to so many. And we considered them thugs and criminals. And during that 8-year period of time, we gained the distinction here in Utah of prosecuting and convicting more of these criminal alien predators than any other state in the United States, except those that directly bordered the country of Mexico. Now, why do I tell you this? Because the recent presidential executive order suspending indefinitely the admission of refugees and refugee immigrants, families, into the United States, along with the public concern over crimes still being committed by a small group of criminal aliens, can cause confusion and public concern and lead some to believe that refugees pose a threat to our Utah citizens. Such a conclusion is both wrong and dangerous. Current research shows that refugees are less likely to commit violent crimes, property crimes, or terroristic acts than native-born Americans. I can't remember one Utah refugee being convicted of a serious crime during my time in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Not one. Because of this, I believe that we owe a responsibility to our refugee community to welcome them with open arms, to be supportive, to be their advocates, and to be their friends. And I might say that many of us have ancestors who followed the same path, or who maybe blazed the same path that Maram and others are following today. In my own case, many of my ancestors, and perhaps many of who came to America or came to Utah, fleeing persecution, imprisonment, and sometimes even death. Thank God for kind people who welcomed these ancestors with hospitality, generosity, and kindness. May we do the same. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome today. Thank you for coming. Our purpose today is to allay the fears of legally qualified, law-abiding refugees living in Utah who may wonder whether you might be at risk of adverse action under the President's January 20 executive order suspending the U.S. Refugee Residence Program. There are thousands of you in Utah who are concerned that your lives might be upended. That is not the case. The order I speak of suspends only the entry of new refugees into the U.S. It does not threaten the status or the rights of legally qualified, law-abiding refugees who are already here. We also seek to assure our fellow citizens that the presence of legally qualified, law-abiding refugees in our country does not present a risk to Americans' safety and security. In fact, quite the opposite. As we see from the example of Ms. Al-Shamari, they are a gift and a blessing. I might also add that the Refugee Act, which has been admitted each year, these numbers have varied widely from several thousand to tens of thousands per year. All presidents, including our current president, and during his first term, of refugees to the United States each year. Refugee status is available only to those who can demonstrate they have fled their home countries due to persecution based on race, religion, or nationality, and who qualify under a formal application process. This vetting process for refugee status is thorough and rigorous. It includes multiple layers of security checks by U.S. government agencies, both overseas and domestic. Applicants are screened by the United Nations, the U.S. Embassy, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, Department of Defense, U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, Department of State, and Office of Refugee Settlement. These agencies assess the eligibility and suitability for resettlement in the United States, security risks, in order to ensure the safety and security of our country and its citizens. Collection of biographical and biometric data and a comprehensive medical exam are also required, as well as cultural orientation prior to entering the country. This process is the gold standard for qualifying a foreign national to reside in the United States. It can take several years. Only a very small percentage of applicants are ultimately approved and admitted. Not all of our own citizens could meet this standard of eligibility to live in the United States of America. Refugees benefit our community in various ways. They enrich our cultural diversity, bring unique skills and experiences, and contribute to the economy. They start businesses, fill labor gaps, display resilience and determination, and serve as an inspiration to all of us. Maram, you're a great example of this. If you are a refugee and you come under an actual threat to your refugee status, your person, your home, or your family, by law enforcement officers or anyone else acting under color of law, we invite you to contact the Utah Refugee Justice League, and one of our volunteer lawyers will give you help without charge. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If any of you would like to speak with us individually, we welcome that. I'm sure some of you may wish to speak with Maram. Stay as long as you like. Again, thank you for your attention and coming today.